Welcome to the study of culture. I hope you're going to find this as a very interesting area of study. It's one of my favorite things in terms of psychology because I've experienced it for many, many years. I've even been able to travel to different parts of the world, not because I wanted to, but because the military said you're going here, there, or yon. But I got to meet some really cool people, really interesting people, and you find out a few things about humanity. You find out the differences in culture from culture to culture, but you also find the similarities, the need for acceptance, the need for belonging, need for safety and security, basic needs, both physical and emotional. As human beings, we all share that. It gives you a different perspective when you deal with people that aren't necessarily the same color you are or speak the same language. I mean, there's so many things to consider. But in the end, we're basically all the same. We're all human beings. So we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the origins. We're going to talk about the definitions of culture because they're various. I'm probably going to zero in on one or two just to get you involved in this. So be ready, take notes. Some of this stuff will be on exams, and you need a working knowledge of these basics to get involved in this journey through what culture is. So let's start with a definition. What better place to start? And this is just one of several. This is the one that I really find attractive, though, because it pretty much covers all the basics here. Culture refers to a set of shared attitudes. Get these now, because this is important. Shared attitudes, values, beliefs, and a troublesome word, norms, and behaviors. Attitudes, values, beliefs, norms, and behaviors that are passed down from generation to generation. What do these things do? They guide behavior. They guide how you interpret the world and how you interact with others. If we could understand that we come maybe from different upbringings, for lack of a better word, but that just because you're different from me doesn't mean you're inferior to me or that you're wrong necessarily, unless it's harmful, then we would get along much better. I'm not going to give you a philosophical sermon about how the world should be healed. But we need to understand that these differences, providing they're harmless, are really cool. Attitudes, values, beliefs, norms, and behaviors. Now, I said norms is troublesome. Here's why it's troublesome. What is normal for one one culture may be very abnormal for other cultures. So, what I find comfortable and acceptable, when I take that to a different culture, we may not fit. And now I think that's where we become troubled. There's this word ethnocentricity, ethnocentric. Ethnocentricity refers to the attitude that because you're different from me, you're inferior. Not a very open-minded, critical view of other people. But that's where we start. And then to carry on with this definition, culture is not biologically inherited. There's no biology in culture. That might be a surprise for many. It's socially transmitted. So it's external. And what does that mean? What does that involve? Well, some obvious things. Language, customs, rituals, social roles, and moral systems. And again, language that's an easy one to understand. Customs, That's fairly easy to understand. Rituals, now we begin to have a few problems. Ritualistic doing things. What's a ritual here? Getting your driver's license when you're 16. Graduating from high school when you're 17 or 18. That's almost a ritual / custom. Social roles, as in I'm a professor. I used to be a police officer. These are jobs, but they become social things. And then moral systems. How do we define morals? Well, morals involve your attitude and interpretation of things, and classifying and categorizing them as to whether they're harmful or acceptable or not, or whatever the case is. Use your imagination. So moral systems. So this stuff is not simple. By the way, how did this stuff come about? And this is in the realm of origins, because we're talking about what culture is and where it started. Now, did somebody sit down one day and say, okay, let's start a culture? No. It's thought, strongly believed, that culture originated as an adaptive mechanism. Early humans developed culture to survive and then even thrive in various environments. From hunting, for example, and you have to develop strategies for that related to the terrain and whatever it is you're hunting. And agricultural stuff in other places where maybe there wasn't a readily available supply of protein, i.e. meat. So what happens? The adaptations become solidified into complex cultural systems. So what does that mean, basically? I don't believe Charles Darwin's evolution theory per se, because it's not scriptural. But here's what I do believe, and I think you would find many people would agree with this, is that you have to adapt to survive. That's a given. There's nothing in Scripture that talks against that. You have to adapt to survive. If you don't adapt, guess what? You perish. So as you adapted, you developed the means to do that, and that became a culture, a very complex culture. So I live in such and such, and I have to do so and so to be able to get through my day. Hope that makes sense. Let's move to a discussion, and I wish we were in class because I would ask, do you have any questions? But unfortunately, in these virtual things, I don't have that option. So we kind of had to move on. If you do, email me, and I'll answer those for you. So let's contrast culture with race, personality, and popular culture, and let's see how this deal really works itself out. Here are some more definitions. Race. That refers to physical characteristics, facial features, skin color. So we're dealing in the physical realm with race. Culture, to reiterate, is social and behavioral. People of the same race can belong to different cultures. That shouldn't be a surprise to you. For example, African Europeans. We don't often hear that term. Somebody that's of African descent who lives in London, that's a different culture from New York City. It's a big city, it has similarities, but it's a whole different way of speaking the English language. So I kind of think you get the idea. Culture is social and behavioral, and people of the same race can belong to vastly different cultures. There are African. There are people of African descent who live in Latin American countries, and they speak Spanish, or they speak Puerto Rican, or they speak Dominican, whatever it is that they speak, some aspect of Spanish. So I think you kind of get the idea. Let's move to personality, because we're talking about culture with race, personality, and popular culture aspects. Personality is an individual and a stable thing, relatively stable across life. And we'll tie all this in together in a few minutes. So what does personality have to do with culture? Well, personality, being individual, makes it unique. It's how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. Culture, on the other hand, is shared by a group. So I have a personality within the cultural group. If I interpret things outlandishly, then I may be rejected by the culture, because I'm an outlier. I don't fit in with cultural standards, so to speak. Lastly, in this section, popular culture involves trends. So we've talked about race, we've talked about personality, and because it's so powerful, have you ever heard the word influencer? Well, here we go. Popular culture involves trends, culturally changing things. Back when I was your age, there was no such thing as social media. But did we have influencers? Yes, we did. People that we looked up to, so to speak, who we thought had it figured out. There are a lot of things that we thought, but this is. I'll give you an example. The music, the music, some of the music, the dress codes, the attitudes, among many other things that came out of California in my young years, was the way you should be a teenager. That's how powerful it was. Most of the guys, not all of us, but a lot of guys aspired to having cars with race engines in them. For example, 55 Chevys with a race mechanic-built motor. That came out of California. Not that California was the only state doing it, but they were the predominant state that we looked toward for trends. Music, slang. Back in the 80s, maybe. This little subculture, if you want to call it that, and I'll talk about subcultures at some point. They called these California girls Valley Girls, because of the way they said things and the things that they said and the language that they chose. If you look at movies from the 80s, particularly comedies, they will have some stereotypical Valley girl, not picking on the girls, but that's where this is an expression of how these things evolve. These influencers, they had a way of saying things and physical movements and things that were supposed to be so cool. And pretty soon all over America, you had girls that talked and acted like Valley girls, even dressed a particular way. So that would be an influencer, right? Only you saw it in movies, you saw it on TV programs, etc., heard it on the radio. You didn't actually have somebody on YouTube because it didn't exist. And that actually makes it more widespread with these social media platforms now. So, popular culture, trends, movies, music, slang, change that's rapid, and it doesn't have deep generational continuity. In other words, it fades out eventually, which is what happened with Valley Girl thing. True culture is deeply rooted, and it's a key word, persistent. It goes on and on and on. So it's like the root of what you are, where you live, etc. Quickly, just as a comparison, I want to talk about human versus non-human cultures. This is pretty interesting stuff here. You might go, why do I want to hear about animals compared to me? Well, we're in that kingdom. But let's look at how we set human culture apart from cultures, because some animals have cultural aspects. Some groups, primates, dolphins, birds, they use I don't know if you could really call it a language, but they use a sound system, noises to communicate, tools to be able to accomplish tasks. Not if you're a robin bird and you run over to your toolbox and get a hammer. Obviously, that's not what we're talking about. But using a rock to break things. People that study animals, if you ever watch some of those programs, pretty interesting to see just how they do the things that they do. The difference between those and us is that what they do is relatively simple, and it's basically for survival. It doesn't involve any complexity. In other words, they don't reason like we do. Human culture includes these things that aren't included in animal culture. Symbolic thought. We can create meaning beyond immediate needs. Think about that. Meaning. Cumulative knowledge. We build on previous generations' knowledge. You'll hear old folk, I'm an old folk, you'll hear some old folk complain about this constant evolving of culture in terms of what is important and what isn't, new trends, new fads. Boy, I would have never listened to music like that in my day, or that's not music, or I'm just picking on that as an illustration. But we build on the knowledge. We take the things that are important and we build on that, and we procreate our culture that way. And then we have some things that are cornerstone type things. Things that we don't really want necessarily to have a lot of change. Adaptability, yeah. We want things to adapt to meet the needs of the ongoing generations, but within reason. And we call these institutions and norms. Formal rules. Governments. Religions. Now, does that mean that everybody in the world thinks the same way in terms of formal rules, governments, and religions? Well, you'd be an idiot, not y'all. A person would be stupid to think that that's the case. And we just talked about it. Your culture is different from, our culture is different from this culture over here and that culture over there. Many of you have come into CU with from a different culture, and you're making adjustments. There are many things you maybe want to change some of the thinking, some of the ways you do things. I don't know what you're going through. I hope it's comfortable, but you adapt or you reject or you sort of assimilate. Well, I'm going to do so much, but I'm not going to chunk my cultural upbringing just to fit in here. I think you've all experienced some aspects related to that. So, by the way, I welcome you here. Formal rules, governments, religions. How powerful are those things? Incredible. We're the only walking things on earth that can create libraries, legal systems. We create things like TikTok that influence how people think and how they behave. These are powerful things. These platforms, I'm probably telling you stuff you already know. How powerful this can be. I hope so far you're learning some things. Again, this would be one of those points where I would ask you to raise your hand if you have any questions. Unfortunately, I can't. So let's move into the next section I want to discuss. Elements of human culture. We're going to be talking about subjective things here. Now, we can break it into objective and subjective. I hope you know the difference. Subjective is factual. Objective is factual. Subjective is interpretive. So let's look at this. These are powerful things. Here are some objective elements in terms of culture. Tangible things, food, clothing, architecture, technology. These are objective things. Let me briefly say something about architecture. It came about out of necessity. That's why you go around the world, you see different structures, how they were built. Why they were built the way they were built was to accommodate or adapt to environmental conditions, and then it became the architecture of that culture. You're not going to find a grass hut in the middle of New York City, nor are you going to find a skyscraper in the outback of Australia. Those things wouldn't work. Subjective elements. These are more influential in psychology. Beliefs. Subjective. Think in terms of interpretation. Beliefs, values, norms, worldviews, attitudes, things that are emotionally connected. Let's look at these things more deeply, because objective is easy to understand. Subjective isn't. So let's talk a bit about that for a few minutes. Let's talk beginning with values. For example, individualism versus collectivism. What do we do in America? We value independence. In other words, the individual being successful regardless of the surroundings, i.e. other people. Japan is a collectivist culture, values group harmony. I'm using Japan as an example. The overriding culture in the world is collectivism, because there are many undeveloped areas. People say third world nations. I hate that term. It sounds like, oh, they're inferior. They're not inferior. You leave the city and go try to survive there, and now you tell me they're inferior. They're very, very astute in terms of what their culture has done for survival for them. So, collectivist cultures, for the benefit of the whole. I get ahead, and then I share that success with my group, my village, whatever the case is. Those are values. Norms. What's considered normal in some cultures may not be considered normal in another. In our culture, making contact, eye contact, is showing respect. If I'm talking to you and you're looking all over the place, you're looking at the ceiling, you're looking at the floor, you're glancing at your watch, in our culture that's considered rude, or an indication, if you know body language, that this person is either uncomfortable with the subject material or not interested whatsoever. In other cultures, eye contact is considered rude. You don't stare at somebody when they're talking to you. You're paying your respect to them by not staring at them in the face. In Japan, when you smile, you shouldn't show your teeth. That's disrespectful. So they put their hand over their mouth. Not all of them. We're talking in general here. So things like that, things that we find normal in our culture are abnormal in another, and vice versa. Beliefs. So we're talking about values, norms, and now beliefs. Cultural understandings of three things that might be something you haven't thought about. Cultural understandings of health, fate, or success. This is borderline religion. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because this is a whole nother course. Belief systems. I teach a behavioral science course. Very interesting. How do we develop beliefs? Well, it's obviously a cultural thing, but it does include things like health. There's some countries religiously, if you have something health-wise gone wrong with you, you've maybe made a god mad somewhere. You've done some violation, and this is your punishment. Fate. People believe in fate. It was my fate that I got this job. It was my fate that I didn't. Or fate. What's fate got to do with things? This is almost in the realm of luck. Christians don't believe in luck. Others do. And I'm not condemning anybody for believing in fate, believing in luck. Sometimes things happen and you go, oh boy, I was lucky. Well, if you think further, you find out that no, it wasn't luck really. And then finally, success. What is defined as success? In general, in our culture in America, in general, I want to reiterate that, is a degree. I'm just using this since that's what we're involved in. You get a degree, whether it's 4 years, a master, or PhD, that's successful, right? What do you do with it? Or what's your job? Are you highly successful in your job? I don't have to define success for you. You know what success is. So these are beliefs. And then finally, worldviews. How people see their role in the universe. Fatalistic. Personal abilities. These are subjective things. All of these things are subjective things. And then briefly, I want to talk about the aspect, or I want to mention the aspect, culture's impact on mental processes and behavior. Western culture values analytical thinking. East Asian cultures, for example, think in terms of holistic. They focus on context and relationship. In Western cultures, America and other Western cultures, we focus on parts, analytical stuff, putting things together. Emotion. Some cultures encourage emotional expression, while others value emotional restraint. Japan, restraint. In America, expression. Italy, way more expressive than America. Germany, very stoic. England, English people, Great Britain, it's kind of a mixture. They have a term over there, keep a stiff upper lip. That's an old term. It means maintain your composure, basically. And then self-concept. In individualistic cultures, i.e., or e.g., America, people describe themselves with personal traits. I am creative. I am this. I am that. In collectivist cultures, they describe themselves in terms of social roles. I am a daughter. I am a son. There's no individualism there. Excuse me. So collectivistic cultures value the whole. We value the parts. Western cultures, individualistic cultures, get myself confused. And then motivation. Culture values shape what motivates us. Personal achievement in individualistic cultures, group success in collectivist cultures. Pretty easy to understand that. Let's briefly discuss cultural psychology and the future of the field. Basically, all I'm going to tell you is that when you're doing this course for this session, and if you go beyond this, avoid ethnocentric bias. Don't judge others in terms of their differences from you, because then you shut down any research or any other valuable thinking. Develop some culturally sensitive mental health interventions. What does that mean? That means that if you're having anger problems toward a culture or whatever the case is, and again, this is kind of a stretch, but I want to mention it, that's going to involve ethnocentricity. Get rid of that. You'll get along much better with people. And this isn't a sermon/lecture telling you what to do. I'm just indicating to you ways to become involved in cultural acceptance. So be culturally sensitive. Be culturally sensitive to the emotional effect it has on you, but those who you're interacting with. And finally, you'll develop a better understanding of human behavior. You'll see the differences and you'll see the similarities. So there you go. It's kind of a weird way to wrap it up, I suppose, but I hope that you've seen culture is not a side topic. It's central to understanding human behavior. And then we're studying this in this course. So you need to understand that we're going to be dealing with things that are universally general and culturally specific, and we're going to compare that stuff. So we'll get with it. I hope this is informative for you, and I'll be meeting you again on this virtual platform in about a week.